One mind, one world. Welcome to another episode of the Epstein Files. I will be picking up where we left off the other night. Chapter 16 of the narrative prose, written by Virginia Giuffre. Excuse me. And without further ado, let's get right into it. I'll just pull it up on here. And we'll do this. So, chapter 16, where we end on chapter 15. She was on the island, and she had just had an orgy with a bunch of girls. So, they're heading back to the States. When we flew back into Palm Beach, Juan drove me back to my own apartment. Lonely for some companionship, I decided to call an old friend. I was longing to be important to someone, and unfortunately, with such little time to have a social life of my own, I was compelled to call TJ again. His mom answered the phone and sounded quite surprised to hear my voice on the other end. She was always kind to me. I even used to bring her back cola cans from other countries, a bizarre hobby she loved collecting. She just didn't know what I saw in her son. Even saying that to his face many times over. Not blind to his ways of cheating and stealing, being a personal victim of it, she made it apparent that she did not approve of TJ's choice and lifestyle. It used to really hurt him how his parents thought so badly of him. So he gave up trying to earn their love a long time ago. As long as he didn't steal from them anymore, he was allowed to live there. Instead of that being a lesson to him, he would just try to be more clever in what he would steal. Less obvious things. He would steal the toaster and sell it for $5 if he knew it. If he knew it would help to get him his next high. Nonetheless, and at my expense, I had a sweet spot for him. With enough water under the bridge, I was able to forget about the troubles he caused. His mom told me she'd pass on the message when he got home, but that could be days from now. The last time he had been home was over a couple weeks. He only stopped by to get something to eat, have a long sleep, and beg for a few bucks, supposedly to help him buy food. Then he was off again without a single word said, only leaving his parents to their own assumptions, which were pretty much correct anyways. I then called around a couple of mutual friends to see if anyone had heard from him. Everyone I spoke to pointed their fingers in the same direction and the worst place possible. Richie's house. One of his best friends told me of how bad he was doing. He's not the same guy anymore, and all he cares about is the next high he gets. If we don't get anything for him, he just loses it and goes off somewhere. It was hard to hear how badly affected my best friend was, and a part of me secretly hoped they weren't right. Still defending him, I told everyone I had spoke to while trying to find him that TJ would be fine. He's just probably going through a bad phase, like we all do sometimes, and needs people to have his back more than ever now. I was pretty much laughed at on the spot. Most people that I considered my friends at the time were only friends by association. As long as we all looked the part, acted the part, and could handle the part, only then did they want to be around us. The last person I called was the last person I had hoped he wasn't with, and it turned out that everyone was right. He was one of the biggest coke dealers in our area. Richie Rich, as everyone used to call him. He didn't look like a typical strung-out junkie or dealer. Instead, he looked like your average preppy college grad with aspiring propositions. He dressed well and acted like a nice guy to imminent clients, only to get them hooked on his drugs and then turns them out onto the streets. He was a businessman, and his business was thriving. He carried everything from most drugs to guns and knives. Having years in all places made him a dangerous acquaintance, using kids off the local Palm Beach streets to run his dirty errands and the errands of the others above him. He made his money by using these teenagers, who, as hard it was to believe, was once somebody's sweet child. I knew TJ didn't have the finances to support himself or his drug habit, so the likelihood of him being indebted to Richie in other ways was a safe assumption. Obtaining Richie's number from one of TJ's friends, Marcus, he asked me, "What do you want to call Richie for? Come over to my place and I can get you whatever you want." Marcus was a sleazebag who would tirelessly continue to try to appeal to my lesser sense of judgment, never getting the hint or just not caring that I could never and would never be interested in it. "No thanks, Marcus. Can I just get the number now, please? It's very important that I get a hold of TJ. I'm really worried about him. I hate having to call this guy, let alone have to ask him for something. Is this about the Adam bullshit? Because if it is, you can let him know what a fucking bitch he is for not showing up to be there for him. You can tell him from me that it's his fault and it should have been him that's lying in the morgue now, not Adam." I was totally thrown by his allegations. I could only mutter out a whisper. "Did you say that Adam is dead? What happened?" "Oh, snaps, I thought you knew. Where have you been, girl? Under a rock or something?" Marcus was less than sensitive about his statements. He got shot in the head by two black guys who got suspicious when their usual supplier didn't show up. Your boy TJ was so fucked up he didn't remember to turn up at Richie's for the delivery. So Richie sent Adam alone, and now he's dead. Adam was a sweet kid who just happened to be born living on the wrong block. Best friends with TJ since childhood, the two were inseparable until puberty hit, and even then they would chase girls together. Adam followed in TJ's every footstep, mimicking his shadow. TJ jumped off the Eiffel Tower, then so too would Adam. When TJ got hooked on drugs, consequently Adam did too, leading ultimately to his death. Wanting to end the conversation with Marcus quickly, I scribbled down the phone number on a blank piece of paper in front of me and hung up the phone to call Richie's place immediately. "Yeah?" It was Richie, who bluntly answered the phone after the first ring. "Hi, Rich. It's Jenna, TJ's ex. We met a couple of times at a few parties." I was trying to remind him of who I was, knowing how paranoid he was about people having his number. "Oh yeah, I remember you. I know who you are. What does he want?" he answered with a dry tone. "I was hoping you could tell me where I could find TJ. I've heard some stuff and I'm really worried about him. Is he alright?" Richie snickered at my concerns. "What, are you his mom or something?" "He's fine. He should be back here around 5 o'clock. I'll tell him you called." In the middle of me saying thanks and goodbye, he hung up the phone, as there's no room for manners in his line of work. I waited until 5 o'clock, watching the minutes on the clock tick past, and when 5 o'clock came and passed by with still no phone call, I couldn't deny to myself that I wasn't stricken with distress. Falling asleep wasn't easy either. I ended up crashing out on my sofa watching TV, half expecting to hear of another murder on the news and it being TJ. Forgetting to put on my eye mask before I went to bed, I was woken up the next morning by rays of the sun beaming into my living room. When asleep, I am a creature of darkness, avoiding any window light at all costs. Staggering to the coffee pot, not used to getting up this early, my first thought that day was TJ and why he hadn't called. A million thoughts rushed through my head like a steam train. Is he okay? Is he not calling because he is still mad from our last breakup? Has he moved on to someone else? Is he in any trouble? Did Richie even pass on my message? The thoughts were an endless infliction, consuming my entire day. Until finally he called my cell phone later in the afternoon. Relief swept over me when I heard his voice on the other end. "Thank God you called. I've been so worried about you. Are you all right?" I jumped in without letting him get past hello. "Yeah, I'm fine. Richie told me you called his house looking for me yesterday and gave me shit for it, saying you were upset or something. What's up?" I knew I would have to be delicate about asking what happened to Adam, thinking he'd be in a mess over it. "I heard from Marcus that something happened to Adam, and I got worried about you." "What's going on?" TJ sounded scared. For what reasons were beyond my knowledge, but I was going to find out. He replied, I don't want to talk about it over the phone. Are you in town so we could meet up or something? It was obvious I wanted him to know that I was more than willing to lend my shoulder for his problems. I'm home now if you want to come over whenever you feel like it. He didn't hesitate in taking me up on the offer. But I won't be able to get there until later. I'm downtown at Richie's place unless you want to come pick me up. It was more of a request than a favor to myself, which is what he was making it out to sound like. Knowing him all too well, I didn't make a fuss of his ill-contemplated attributes. I got the address off him and made my way into the ugliness of the not-so-dazzling parts of the Palm Beach's downtown area. Rolling up my windows and locking the doors to my truck, I nervously drove through the rough streets, trying to find Richie's apartment complex. Knowing all too well the history of the area, it's not a place a lone white girl in a nice truck wants to be seen. Many reports of locals rushing up to vehicles with a weapon, demanding money, cars, or just angry and out to hurt someone. I was speeding through the streets, wanting to get out there as quick as I could. A sad world we live in with so much hurt everywhere you look, and nobody wants to do anything about it. Just accepting the hopelessness of never being able to achieve anything more than what our civilization has succumbed to. Being among one of those people, we were similar in so many ways, only separated by our personal fears and the different direction they pulled us into. I drove straight through the open gates at the entrance to the complex and parked on the gutter in front of Richie's block of units. A crowd of people stood outside the blocks I was entering. Being hit on and offered drugs simultaneously, my cheeks went flush, and I put my head down, not saying a word. Walking up the corridors of the staircase looked like a scene out of a horror flick. Graffiti covered the peeling of green paint on the walls, and a pungent stench of something rotting, only to the worst of my imagination, filled my nostrils. I could hear babies screaming through the walls, and trying to find the unit number was difficult from the sporadic flickering of the fluorescent lights above me. At last I found Richie's one, quite astonished with myself that I even made it this far. I had to knock loudly on the door a few times before a young girl answered the door, with eyeliner bleeding down from her eyes. Her jet black hair was strung out in a mess, and she looked off her face on some hard drug. She had only her bra and a short skirt on to cover her private areas, and a cigarette hung out of her mouth to complete the full picture of terrible state she was in. She looked me down with contempt and snubbed at me. What do you want? I maintained my politeness and told her TJ was expecting me. She opened the door and walked away, leaving me by myself to venture through looking for TJ. Passing through the kitchen, it looked like a hospital lab with syringes on the countertops and medicine containers lying around everywhere. Minding my steps through the dirty house, I walked to the back to the living room and found TJ in a K-hole strung out on a filthy couch. Hey there, he acknowledged with a giant smile spread across his face. He probably didn't even know who I was from the dreadful state he was in. By first look at him in months, and I was in utter shock. My jaw must have dropped to the floor at the very sight of him. Never seeing him so skinny and unhealthy looking, I took pity and wanted to help him before things even got worse and he ended up like Adam, dead. TJ, hey buddy, it's Jenna. Remember I was coming to pick you up today? You don't look so good. What are you doing so messed up? I don't even think he could understand what I was saying because he could only reply by giggling and rolling over, patting the couch as if it were a fluffy animal. I stood over him now and raised my voice so he'd know I was serious and snap out of it. TJ, get up now. I ushered at him to get off the couch, repeating myself a few times over, and with no response, I knew I had to get physical. Rolling him back over to face me again, I smacked his face hard, and I'm sure it stung, but I got the reaction I wanted. He sat up and looked at me confused. At least now he was able to focus on my words, requesting him to come with me. He was getting up from the couch and stumbling around before falling down on the floor again. Putting his arm around my neck and carrying the majority of his weight, I helped him up many times over and down 3 flights of stairs into my truck and drove him back to my place. It was a triumph on its own, arriving downstairs in one piece. Being the only person who really cared if TJ lived or died, I felt like the responsibility of helping him was my concern alone. Thankfully, Jeffrey was in Palm Beach for the next couple weeks, entertaining royalty, which gave me a little time to try and clean TJ up. I called a few of his friends that I knew and asked them not to score any drugs for him anymore, pleading with them and telling all of them he was on the brink of death, reminding them of the friendship between us, all that once existed before the drugs corrupted so many of us. Some of them laughed at me, telling me I was wasting my time with TJ, and others were nice enough to at least lie to my face politely and promise not to help him feed his addiction. I just wanted to remedy all of his pain and problems, but I felt so helpless fighting his battle against the streets. I bought some marijuana for him to smoke, hoping to subside the withdrawals he was facing over the next few days, but with no avail. The only thing that would help him was my Xanax. A few of those pills and he would go back to sleep, only waking up to get more of them. I would have to force him out of bed to have a shower once a day and make sure he ate something. He was more like a baby right now than he was a boyfriend. Too much in need of something I couldn't give. End of chapter 16. All right, Liberty, how's it going? Do I know who O'Keefe is of Project Veritas? I don't think so. Is that the white guy who runs it? I'm not really sure. Dolly, how are you? Headlines with a voice. Hello, Kay. Yeah, I heard about that, Deborah. I would have liked to go, but I didn't explicitly get invited. But that's not to say I wouldn't have crashed it. I couldn't make it happen, which is fine. Okay, continuing on with chapter 17. When I went to see Jeffrey, over the next course of days, he picked out the dilemma I wore, spread across my face right away. You're back with TJ, aren't you? It was so funny he knew me so well. Yeah, he's in a real bad place in his life right now and needs my help. He looked astonished and replied, You're a much better friend than I am, you know. People like him, and I know people like him, and trust me, they never change. No use in even trying. He might be right with that one. I believed him too, knowing I was stupid for even attempting to change TJ, but my heart felt differently. He was still a human being and a good friend of mine, just down at his worst. That's what good friends are for. I laughed back at his remark, not wanting to take this conversation too much further. I admire your loyalty at least, but take my word for it. He will hurt you again. His words were chilling but true. I had to find out for myself, though. Almost seeming like an actual friend for a second, he ruined his brief momentary image by turning over from the unfinished massage that I was giving to him, and acquired his sexual longings for my worn-down soul. Not only did he know that I didn't want to endure any demands tonight, but his energy enhanced from knowing it too. Looking up at him during the foreplay, it was an easy observation from the look in my eyes that I hated every minute of it, seething through all of my duties until he climaxed. Most days, I could take this kind of treatment. It was only seldom I couldn't hold in the way Jeffrey disregarded my feelings. He had me just where he wanted me, like a pawn piece on a checkers board. Pawn is in chess, people, not checkers. I was his own personal sex slave. For the remainder of the evening, I stayed quiet, not sure of what to say after an episode like that. It was a vigorous display of how calumniating he could really be. He required me to clean up his spilled semen off his genitals with a warm washcloth before he retired to his bedroom for a good night's sleep. Only a monstrous creep could sleep easy at night, knowing what pain he caused others. I went downstairs and asked Juan, who was still in the kitchen, to pay for me for the evening, telling him that Jeffrey had gone to sleep for the rest of the night. It wasn't an unusual request. Juan would often have to fix up the girls after the sessions and sometimes even drive them home. He went to Jeffrey's desk, and underneath was his duffel bag that always held insurmountable bundles of crisp $100 bills. I can almost smell the money. He took out 2 for me and handed them over. I thanked him and said goodnight, as I was always polite to Juan and his wife Maria. His eyes were gentle and told me more than what he was allowed to say. I understood well. We all needed to eat and pay bills, unfortunately, even sometimes at our own moral expense. Putting the keys into the ignition, I started up the engine and reversed out of Jeffrey's driveway with promptness. I didn't want to be there a moment longer than I had to. Not much to look forward to getting back to my apartment either. I needed some time to filter my emotions. Parking my truck in front of a nearby beach, I took my shoes off gradually, stepping out of the door into the fog. Man, I'm getting beach withdrawals right now, guys. I want to be at a beach now. I walked down to the edge of the sand where the water licked at my toes. My life was slipping away from me, and I was really beginning to question the differences between living and dying. I was so tired of everything. My whole existence revolved around being everything to everyone, forgetting about being something for myself altogether. Pretending to be someone else became an attribute I was better than good at, probably much of why Jeffrey liked me in the first place. This time I held back my tears and only let the anger fester into a deep pit in my stomach. My rage was aimed at the very people who abandoned me to fend for myself in the first place, and accepted this life as normal for me. My parents. When I got back to my apartment, I was expecting to have a look after TJ. But to my surprise, he had come around good that night. He greeted me at the door and asked how my evening was. It was all fine, I easily lied. I never let anyone inside close enough to see my vulnerabilities. They were mine alone to battle. In my head, they were too shameful to talk about anyways. He wanted to talk about something else anyways. Sitting down in the dining room table, he began a spiel. I know you don't think much of me anymore. How could you? I'm a junkie who steals and sells drugs for a living. But I promise that's all going to change now. Adam is dead because of me, and the only way I can make it up to him is to get away from it all. I promise things are going to get better. It was a convincing talk, but I knew him all too well. His demon inside yearned for him to fail, but who was I to second-guess him out loud? I could only try to give him hope. No one is perfect, TJ. At least you're trying now, and that's all that matters to me. I am so proud of you. I gave him a sincere hug and kissed him for the first time in a long time. I love you, he said to me, and I returned my love back. We slept in the same bed together that night, and we were officially back on together. 2 days later, I was gone again, beckoned to be in Santa Fe. Ghislaine only told me that I was to meet someone there, not sure of whom that was. It wasn't my place to ask questions. As far as I knew, it could be anyone, and I had no choice but to be compliant to their needs. It was the middle of the day when I arrived at the airport. One of the ranch hands came to pick me up in a big work truck that smelled like dirt and sweat. But I didn't mind that. I didn't mind. That's what I loved about the countryside. When we arrived at the mansion, my guest was already there waiting for me. I couldn't wipe the look off my face as he turned around from the bookshelf that he was standing at. Hello, that same old cheesy grin greeted me once again. It was His Highness Prince Andrew, and what a sight. He wrapped his arms around my waist and greeted me like an old friend. I hugged him back, rolling my eyes at the same time, already dreading what lay in store over the next couple of days. My job was to entertain him endlessly, whether that meant having to bestow him my body during an erotic massage, or simply take him horseback riding. For the next couple of days, he was to be my only concern, but he wasn't. I called in checking on TJ a few times a day, not wanting to be a nag, but just hoping he hadn't had any thoughts about relapsing. He was doing great, even applying for a few jobs. Being reassured by him made my time away less complicated, and thankfully with the help of my ever-ready Xanax, I was able to cope with the ordeal. The mansion was completely empty, save a couple of maids who also cooked our dinners for us, and a couple bodyguards that we hardly even saw at all. The time dragged by slowly for me, as I was counting down the hours until I flew away again. Anywhere but here, I thought. It wasn't easy meeting the sexual desires of these strange men, the prince being one of them. He loved my feet and even licked in between my toes. Then there was the lack of passion in the intimacy we shared. To him, I was just another girl, and to me, he was just another job. Not the right reasons to be together, but I thought in this world and to these monsters, there didn't need to be a reason. To them, it was nothing but a reenactment of their personal fantasies. To me, it was a living nightmare. Thankfully, one of Jeffrey's assistants from New York called me on my cell phone early in the morning on the second day to fill me in on my next adventure. I had a flight booked for me to leave that afternoon to arrive at LaGuardia Airport in the evening. Even though I had to go back to yet another controlling man, I was still relieved. At least I was used to the confinements of Jeffrey's control, and in some twisted way, he was more comforting than these strangers he sent me to. Overlooking the city of New York, as the plane landed, felt like I was flying from one cage to another, entrapped by falling victim to the predators that lured me into their enclosure. I didn't know how I'd ever get out again. That deep pit in my stomach began to churn again, a physical reaction to the anxiety I was plagued with. Before getting off the plane, I touched on my makeup to hide any signs of the frailty I was feeling. Jojo met me at the arrival terminal and picked up my luggage. He never said much at all, nodding to any reciprocating conversation. I don't think he could really speak that good of English. It was better for me as I preferred the quietness of the moment. He opened the back door for me and we headed off for my next prison cell. When we got to Jeffrey's mansion on the 72nd, the place looked empty. I walked up the staircase to Jeffrey's office and he wasn't there. Feeling a bit hungry, I walked back down to where the kitchen was. I opened the fridge and found some leftovers that Adam, Jeffrey's chef, had cooked. I loved his cooking, when it wasn't filled with bean sprouts and tofu. He used to make me the best pizza upon request, or whenever he was cooking seafood, which he knew I hated. I had an honest appeal about him and never even took notice when on many occasions Us girls would be prancing around topless, sometimes even stark naked around the pool or beach. He would have to service our meals and would do it with such a casual professionalism, never making anyone uneasy at any occasion. Halfway through my meal, the kitchen door swung open, and incoming was Jeffrey and Ghislaine. Choking down my bite of food now, I got up from my seat and kissed them both on the cheeks. "Hi guys, how are you?" I greeted them, and Ghislaine answered for them both. "Good, good. Sit down and finish your meal. Don't let us interrupt you." I hated eating alone in front of people. Chewing food and maintaining a conversation at the same time didn't give off the best look. I was just finishing anyways. "Can I get you guys anything, maybe a tea or something?" Always playing my part, another reason to keep me around, I guess. I went beyond my call of duty, and after the last period with them, I had been reminded of my place. "Yes, I'll take one," Ghislaine stated. "Jeffrey, how about you? Anything I can get for you?" I asked again, and he answered, "No thanks, we ate. We just ate, and I'm still full." And they sat down together on the stools at the kitchen bench. I got out the shiny red kettle from the cupboard, knowing my way all too well around the kitchen, and put it over the hot stove plate. Turning around to face them, I thought they were acting peculiar. "So," Ghislaine started the conversation, "how was the ranch with the prince? El Príncipe?" It was a natural reaction for me to blush, knowing exactly what she was referring to. Keeping busy preparing her cup of tea and avoiding eye contact with both of them, I started to unpack the counter where I had been eating. "I think he had a really good time. He seemed relaxed during the trip, and when we said goodbye to each other, he gave me a kiss." I went on to tell them what we did together. I took him horseback riding, nowhere too far, just around the property. We went swimming in the pool, and of course I gave him plenty of massages. He had a massage at least a couple times each day, really seeming to enjoy his time there. It's what they wanted to hear, not the truth of how disgusting I had felt over the whole thing, but they already knew the truth anyways. It's what they had trained me for in the first place. Like two proud parents, they both looked over me with such content. "Good, you did really well," Jeffrey complimented me. Turning around to the boiling kettle, I finished Ghislaine's tea for her, and the conversation led on to other subjects. We all ventured up to Jeffrey's office, and out came the infamous duffel bag that went wherever he did. I was given close to $1,000 for my time in Santa Fe. More than what I thought anybody at my young age could make for a couple days' work. It was fulfilling the obscene, vulgar needs of the so-called privilege that earned me so much. End of chapter 17. So, just to stir up some discussion, both Kay and Deborah think that, man, I'm tired. Excuse me, guys. Virginia is not a victim due to various reasons. What does everybody else think? I am going to plead the fifth on this and simply just be the conduit for relaying the story. So let's continue with chapter 17. Excuse me, chapter 18. Chapter 18. I spent the next few days in New York, venturing out to do some shopping therapy. I loved the eccentric parts of the city. Every street was different, but the same energetic vibe filled all of them, animated with all different walks of life. Hanging out at the coffee shops, reading the newspaper, or a good book was a favorite pastime while in the Big Apple. Being close enough to get back to Jeffrey for when he needed me, but also far enough to get away from all of it. Most of the day slipped by without being missed, and I made my way back to Jeffrey's. Making one last pit stop, I walked into an old bookshop to browse at their assortment of old titles. I wasn't in any hurry, so I took my time reading the backs of interesting-looking books. I bumped into a girl looking down the same aisle I was down. "Sorry, I'm so clumsy," she was apologizing for my mistake. No, it was my fault. I wasn't looking at where I was going. I get so wrapped up with my nose in a book and trip over my own 2 feet if I'm not careful enough. We were both giggling now, and I further introduced myself to her. Her name was Valerie or Vicky or something like that. Anyway, she was a student at a school for hairdressing nearby. Chatting away, both young and similar interest in each other's choice of reading, we found it easy to speak with one another. She wasn't from around here, only being in the city for the last 2 months. Her parents hated her being here, but were also supportive in her big decision to move from the countryside in hopes of her accomplishing her own dreams. Aside from not having her near them, they just wanted her to be happy and supported her big decision to move to the city, helping her pay some of the way. She was a pretty girl with cherry red hair and soft white skin. Her long legs were emphasized by the short flowery dress that complemented her hourglass figure. She would definitely fit into the pro quo for going down one of Jeffrey's little black books. Only imagining the look on his face upon meeting her, I could already see his sly grin spread from ear to ear. Knowing exactly what he would do with her, and the very thought of him tarnishing a sweet country girl such as her just couldn't be done. It was the beginning of a turning point in my life that started with realizing I had a choice at hand, and the effect I could have on one person alone. I must be off, but it was really nice to meet you. Bidding her goodnight and paying for my books, I turned around with one last glance over my shoulder and said, "Good luck in the city." Leaving that bookshop was a small step into a growing abundance of larger strides to come. Turning the corner onto 72nd Street, I had an undeniable feeling in the pit of my stomach again. But this time, it wasn't the familiar hurl of anxiety I was used to after I had done something wrong that I had regretted. I'm just reading the words. It's really bad English, but it was a new feeling of pride and inner strength. I quite liked it a lot. I held up my head high and smiled on the inside when Jeffrey asked me how my day was and what I got up to, not mentioning I had let one girl slip on by. The icy winter winds faded away, making way for the approaching sunny days that blossomed the colorful shades of spring. This was my favorite time of the year. Making the most use of his island, we spent countless days of the increasingly hot days there. A constant array of visiting guests and plentiful young women to flock around, keeping them entertained, was the typical lazy afternoon on Little St. Jeff's. We ate, drank, and played under the blue blanket of cloudless skies. It's hard to fathom that this is some people's reality. It's just literally like living in a fantasy world when you think about it compared to most of, you know, Central Asians and Africans, how they live. But to many, this lifestyle could seem idyllic, unless you were like me, the one on the other side of the fence where the grass wasn't so green. Unfortunately for me, in some ways not, I was mostly expected to attend to only Jeffrey's insurmountable of sexual desires, whereas the other girls who came one day and went the next were promised a multitude of opening doors just for their meager participation in sexual acts with random men, only to be disappointed when they realized they were nothing more than a single night out for these geriatric senior citizens. Excuse me. Who most likely, due to Alzheimer's, would sooner forget the entire experience, let alone their first name. Surrounded by those in our world who many looked up to, but not seeing them from where I was standing, I didn't have the highest of standards in humanity. Then I met Al Gore and his lovely wife during one of the many weekends away in the Caribbean. I was blown away by the amount of attention Al doted on his wife. It was so sweet to watch. They sat next to each other at the dinner table, gazing into one another's eyes, having an intimate conversation between them. Among the many guests visiting that night, and many of them young, beautiful women, not one stood Al's eyes stray elsewhere. To them, they were the only ones there. He was up for a presidential election that year. Okay, so this is 2000, obviously. And he definitely had my vote. Anyone that could show that much devotion and passion towards his loved ones could have that same devotion towards running a country. Or at least I thought so. He only left his wife's side to have a walk down to the beach with the host of the weekend, Jeffrey. The weather was still warm in the evening when I decided to break away from the idle chat around the table and take a stroll too. Not wanting to interrupt the conversation between Jeffrey and Al, I walked in the opposite direction, plucking the washed-up seashells embedded in the island, embedded spell wrong, along the way. I enjoyed the serenity and the solitude of the island. So many nooks and crannies to get lost in. I could imagine that I actually disappeared from the entire world for a moment. By the time I came back from the main house, the majority of the small crowd had been long gone, retired to the cabanas. Even Jeffrey had gone off to bed, but trust party animal Ghislaine to still be up entertaining the remaining guests left at the table, regaling her wild stories of people and places she has embarked on. Trying not to make eye contact as I walked past them on my way back to the cabana, carrying my seashells inside my curled-up blouse. I wasn't up for any more pointless talking tonight. Emptying out my seashells into a plastic bag, I went over to my new treasures one by one. I love collecting odd things, shells being one of my favorites. Glenn and I shared that interest together. We would enjoy walkabouts around the island, searching for lost pieces of the remnants that pirates had left behind centuries ago. Pirates spelled wrong. It was mostly broken plates or smashed glass from bottles of ale. Well, that's quite interesting, actually. And even occasionally, getting lucky enough to find some old coins here and there. It wasn't easy, though. Both loving a challenge, it was perfect for us. During many scratches from the bushes, we would be searching through and then the sore arms from digging all day. But it was worth it in the end. After nearly 2 years of collecting items and saving them, we made Jeffrey a mosaic table out of the remaining pieces left from the era of the Pirate's Day. Upon completing it, we were both astounded in our creation. It was such an item of rarity and an interesting piece of work. When we presented it to Jeffrey, he was even impressed not only in our amazing finds, but what we did with them. The table became an important work of art that Jeffrey showed off inside the main house's lounge room, sparking much intrigue and table conversation by many of the visiting guests to his island. The next morning was a goodbye for most of the visitors, leaving just the usual behind. Soaking in the sun and living it up in the lap of luxury is how the next few weeks were spent before having to get back to the dredge of the city. Sometimes we'd have to go to St. John's Islands for Jeffrey to do some work in the office. It was so boring for me to sit in there listening to him on the phone or coming down on some poor employee for something stupid like not answering the phone correctly. If I knew he was going to be a while, I would excuse myself for a bit of shopping. Not that the Caribbean had much to offer in the world of fashion, but there was never an amount of bikinis one girl could own, and I loved all the little knickknacks one could find there. Flying back on a private jet was the best part because I could transport just about anything I wanted to back to my apartment, which was already filled with an assortment from my shopping adventures and collection of seashells from the Caribbean. The next big dinner party on the island had another significant guest appearance, being the one and only Bill Clinton. He is the only president in the world to be dismissed from his role as a world leader because he was caught with his trousers around his ankles and had the stain to prove it. Publicly humiliating his wife and himself, he retired from his title, but not from his lifestyle. There wasn't a big party as such, only a few days of us eating at the dinner table. There was Jeffrey at the head of it all, as always. On the left side was Emmy, Glenn, and I. Sitting across the table from us was Bill with two lovely girls who were visiting from New York. Bill's wife, Hillary's absence from the night made it easy for his apparent provocative, cheeky side to come out, testing the girls on either side of him with playful pokes and brassy comments. There was no modesty between any of them. We all finished our meals and scattered in our own different directions. Jeffrey wanted his evening massage before bed, and Glenn and Emmy went to their own office to talk about something, leaving our guest of honor to find company elsewhere. Strolling into the darkness with two beautiful girls around either arm, Bill seemed content to retire for the evening. He wanted to have a hot bath before bed, while I began a massage in the tub. Starting with his feet and calves, he wanted to end the night quickly. Never showing any restraint, he sat on the edge of the tub and asked me to perform on him orally. I did my best job, but that's all our relationship was these days, a dreadful job. Getting it over with and done with as quick as possible was my hope. But I couldn't let him pick up on those vibes. To make him enticed, I had to act like his little porn star, knowing exactly how he wanted it. Only then would my duties be fulfilled and I would be able to get back to the reality of my complicated life. Before I could say goodnight, Jeffrey had one more request. He wanted... God damn it. He wanted me to tuck him under the blankets and fluff his pillows for him. Then I had to reach under the covers and massage his feet while watching him fall asleep. He even wanted me to wait like 20 minutes or so after he fell asleep before I could leave. It wasn't unusual for him to ask it, but God, I hated it. Never offering, I would always wait for him to request it. Once he was snoring gently, I wiped my hands clean of the lotion and quietly closed the doors to his room. Making my way up the outward spiraling staircase, I felt the breeze blow through my hair and looked up to the heavens. The stars shone so bright out here in the middle of nowhere with no big city lights to hinder their effect. I could get lost in time staring into them. No matter how far gone I really felt, there was always something about a simple caress from the wind or the reflection of the star sweeping sky in the black, glossy ocean that would always remind me of my fond love of nature's blessings. Back in New York, there was nothing left of nature to adorn. It was a dwelling for those who no longer saw the use for trees without cages or blue skies without clouds of man-made fumes and gases. Unfortunately, if we weren't in the Caribbean, we were in New York, hardly going back to Palm Beach, barely even seeing my family, my dog. She finally mentioned her dog again, or TJ these days at all. In my parents' heads, I was all grown up and educated in the world of wealth, not needing them any longer. They would just wait for my call once in a while to let them know how I was doing, and that was the extent to our restricted relationship. The road my life has led down never has kept me close to home anyways, so to me it wasn't anything unordinary, but still a sad existence to be without a family of my own. It would have been nice to be missed, though, rarely letting myself think like that. No room for pity in my heart. If I did, the floodgates could open and I'd have enough grief in one lifetime to go around a few times that they would have never been closed. Jeffrey's business was running well from the looks of his attentiveness. The office he owned in the Upper East Side of Manhattan. Alan Dershowitz, his colleague in finances and personal solicitor, a bird of the same feather I had seen hanging around the island and Jeffrey's Manhattan mansion, more and more these days. Alan's taste for the young and beautiful was a bias for a blooming relationship between him and Jeffrey. After an explicit session of Jeffrey's vulgar pilgrimage into my body, we were interrupted by a knock at the door by Jeffrey's good friend Alan. I wrapped myself up in Jeffrey's pink bed sheets, which is the color preference he chose to sleep in, because it reminded him of the same color of his own words, pussy, and covered my face from the unexpected intrusion. Jeffrey got up and wrapped a towel around his loins and answered the door completely calm. Opening the bedroom door and letting Alan inside, they began to converse about business immediately, right in front of me. Jeffrey started to tell Alan what needed to be done while he jostled some notes down quickly. I peeked my head from underneath the covers, thinking that they were too wrapped up in their work to notice me get up and dressed. And Jeffrey turned back to me and told me to just stay there. This would only take a second. Going back to Alan, he turned his focus back into work and hustled out a few more orders before letting Alan out of the door and returning his attention to me. Sorry about that. Work never stops, and neither will the money coming in. How else am I going to make $1 million while sleeping? Jeffrey chuckled as he sat back down on the bed next to me. I laughed at his humorous and mostly true statement. Then a strand of hair fell in front of my face. Before I could get to it, he put it back behind my ears and sweetly stroked my face. For a moment, we just looked into each other's eyes, and he seemed nearly almost human to me. It was bizarre how he could be so kind and gentle one moment, and the second beforehand I was being treated like no more than a common plaything left out for display. Nothing more than an ego trip. Jeffrey got off on letting the ones he wanted to know that he could own anything and anyone he wanted in this world. Maybe for a brief minute I believed the sincerity behind his eyes, but that vision would quickly fade away, and I would be left second-guessing why I even fell for his deceitful tricks for a moment. Jeffrey got up from behind the bed and asked me to join him for a shower. In his bedroom, which was the entire top floor, he had a glass shower enclosed underneath a glass skylight right in the middle of the room. It was a perfectly accessible feature for a man that loved both being clean and nude, but still an odd feature at that. As I always did whenever I showered with him, I lathered a loofah with soap suds and would scrub his body up and down. This is so weird. Okay. In between his toes and even behind his ears and, of course, his genitals area. Okay. The sunlight shone through the glass ceilings into where we were standing, making the moment feel even more surreal on top of the already popped Xanax I had popped before breakfast earlier that morning. Breakfast? Oh my goodness, woman. Jeffrey was in such a light-hearted mood that day, making funny cracks at me and acting like a flirt. When I was finished washing him, he actually wanted to wash me too, which was another totally out of his character suggestion. For the rest of the day, he took me everywhere with him, the office and then to a friend's place, even wanting to hang out with me for a while. I wasn't used to be treated anything more than a dog on a leash. When he acted like this, it was completely spun me around, confusing me even more. We were spending heaps of time together these days, a lot more than usual. At the ranch, we would do things together, alone, and not just the usual perverted things I was accustomed to doing with him either. Horseback riding on his ranch during weekends away by ourselves, and movie nights, snuggling up over a bucket of popcorn, instead of having to massage his feet during the entire film, became his way to alter my perception of my original notion that I wasn't just his sex slave. I thought I was finally becoming his friend. We went quad biking, and when we did so, he no longer wanted me to take my own bike. He preferred me to sit on the back of his, holding onto him tightly, and he even tried to teach me how to drive a manual stick shift. He was definitely trying to show a softer side of himself, different to the stone-cold slave driver I had come to respect out of fear over the many years. Still a hard image to change after all I had been through and seen over the years I had been with him. Nonetheless, he was still my boss, so I humored his attempts and matched his caring demeanor, giving him the impression I was intrigued in our new kind of affair. End of chapter 18. Look at comments. Supposedly she'd already been trafficked. Why didn't she not go after them, or why didn't the police? Been her handsomely, wished her well when she decided to get married after he sent to Thailand to set a massage. Prince Andrew was arguably the highest ranking intelligence officer for the Queen. Kono Slur. She's not offering anything that doesn't fit the outline story. Doesn't sound like a rape situation. And to go back for a second and third time, whatever. Again, I'm going to plead the fifth on this. Let me know what you guys think about Kay's comments. Listen to how she talks is almost like a bit of jealousy for unrequited love. Yeah, Ukrainian women are crazy. Deutsche Bank Epstein documents tallied 30 million to Eastern Europeans. Carol? Sounds so abusive. Mandalay Bay, really? Linda McMahon, Bruce McMahon, MD helicopter responsible for Mandalay Bay shooting. I will have to look into that. I said worse about my husband. That's funny. Experimental RX for cancer is 5K. Looking into hydroxychloroquine as a possibility. So abused, woe is me. $250 for a can of Coke and a candy bar. $400 for French fries. Yes, Xanax is. I actually don't know what the category of drugs is, but it's extremely powerful. Really suppresses memory. Benzodiazepine, that's what it is. Trafficked foreign prescriptive drugs into U.S. to be sold into black market. I believe that. Yes, he did. Diplomatic immunity. Diplomatic immunity is BS. It's just drug dealer immunity, really. That's a good question. Why, if there were so many girls, why haven't more come forward? Especially given the fact that not only is Epstein dead, but Ghislaine Maxwell's in jail, right? And she was the queen on the chessboard. She was the most powerful player in this, at least at this level, right? You know, Jeffrey was the king on the chessboard, right? He was the most important piece. But once the king was captured, the game was over. But the queen was still at large and arguably more powerful than Jeffrey, right? But she also has been captured. So it is puzzling. Another question that nobody has answered for me yet is why, if Jeffrey did kill himself, which we are assuming happened, or if he's dead, obviously he didn't kill himself, if he is dead, what happened to his kill switch? That's my question. And I haven't really heard anybody talking about this. So, it's a question that I have. You would think he would have a kill switch, right? Given that this is a probability, he obviously is a guy that thinks ahead, right? Why would they kill him if they knew he had a kill switch? Or are they that powerful that they knew he had a kill switch and knew exactly what his kill switch was and knew how to disable it? Maybe that's why. I don't know. Linda Tilton. Yeah, it depends on what you take. If you take too much, though, it really, from what I've heard, can make your memory go. But okay, guys, I am going to call it for this session. Please, if you like this and you haven't subscribed yet, feel free to give me a sub. I would really appreciate it. It's free to do. It's in the bottom right-hand corner, if anybody wants to do that. And if you want to support me even more, I don't get paid for this work. I did get demonetized, but I did reapply for monetization, I think the day before yesterday, but I don't anticipate on hearing a response for several weeks, because that's just what I've heard is the normal response time. So if you do want to support me via Patreon, you can do it for as little as $1 a month, which is just $12 a year. Or you can, cancel at any time too. Or you can do more. I got a couple people doing $5 a month, which is really appreciate that. Or you can also make a one-time donation via PayPal or GoFundMe as well, if you want to do that too. So my social links are also in the description box. Twitter, Instagram, if you want to see pictures of me, my personal life, if that interests you. I also post memes on Instagram too. And then on Twitter is a lot more of journalistic stuff too, as well as my Facebook page. Thank you, Nan. And Nan is one of my Patreons, so shout out to Nan L. Phillips for that. Oh, and one more thing. Man, I'm slow tonight, man. My brand new tube is a Rhodium account, which is one of the premium accounts on brand new tube, along with guys like Sean, Ryan, Sonia, Anna, that sort of crowd, and then other people. So I really appreciate that. If you guys want to give me a sub down there, I have interviews and videos that have been removed from this channel. Several of my George Webb interviews, and also one of my John Wedger interviews as well has been removed. Again, they don't really say why. They just say I'm violating guidelines, community guidelines. So thanks, bro. And yeah, so if you want to give me a sub on the brand new tube, all of my content is on there, including all of that censored content that YouTube has removed. So it does give me a bump up on No Problem Bowie on the brand new tube algorithms. They really support my content. Sometimes they actually feature it on the front page, which is pretty cool. And I do think that brand new tube is the future. Even more so than BitChute, I think, because for several reasons. I just think their branding is better. Also, you can live stream on brand new tube, which I haven't done yet, but I may do that in the future just to test it. I actually might do that for my next Epstein files, just to see, just to test it out, because I've never done that yet. So also BitChute, if people like the BitChute, it's another great place to subscribe to me. All my content is on there uncensored as well. It's also great backup in case this YouTube channel does get ovened or nuked, which I don't think it should. I am complying with YouTube's guidelines. So I am trying to follow their rules. It is their company. So I do have to do that and try to respect that, even if I don't agree with their, basically non-compliance with the First Amendment. So, yeah, that being said, I'll either do my next broadcast later tonight or tomorrow. So as far as the Epstein files. So be on the lookout for that. Do you have a Discord? Yes, I do, actually. Let me put it in the chat if anybody wants to join. I have posted the link before, but the Discord links expire after, I think it's 12 hours or 24 hours. So I do have some, it's actually quite a small group we got going over there on Discord. And I'm not on there as much as I would like to be, but I use it to chat with Ryan sometimes, and some of my subs, like Mr. Va, who is a very active subscriber of mine. We chat on there. So, it's just a place I use for updates and you know, to actually chat with some of my subscribers too in a more intimate way. If people want to do that, let me just get that link up, and I will share it if anybody does want to join. Okay, I don't know how to. Oh, invite people. That's how I do it. Copy. So I'll just put that in the. There's the Discord. If anybody wants to join that, that link will expire, I think, in a day or so. Okay, thanks for that, Deborah. I will check out that Mandalay Bay video. I actually don't really know anything about that incident. It does ring a bell. I kind of know the basic idea, but I'll check that out. No problem, Kay. No problem. So if anybody wants to check out that Discord, there's that link in there. So thanks for tuning in. Again, I'll do another Epstein Files broadcast pretty soon here. Stay frosty. This is Attican, the Lonely Ronin. All the best from the Midwest. I will talk to you all soon. And until next time.